Most of us eat next to no fermented food. A spoonful of yogurt, maybe a pickle on a sandwich, and that's about it. Our grandparents had it on the table at nearly every meal. Researchers who put people on a diet richer in fermented foods measured a real jump in gut bacteria diversity within a matter of weeks, along with lower markers of inflammation. Most of us skip it for one simple reason. Fermenting has a reputation. Weeks on a shelf, special equipment, more patience than we've got lying around. That reputation isn't fully earned. A good number of the most useful ferments out there are done in 24 hours flat. One of these, a 1,000-year-old soybean dish from Japan, packs more vitamin K2 than almost anything on your grocery shelf. Another one can start shifting your gut bacteria within days, not months. I'm a retired nurse, not your doctor, so none of this replaces an actual visit to yours. Just what the research says. 10 ferments, 24 hours apiece. Dairy, soy, grain, vegetable, the whole pantry covered. Let's start with the one already sitting in your fridge. Kefir grains aren't actual grains, by the way. They're little rubbery clusters of bacteria and yeast living together, kind of like a tiny town that's learned to share. Drop them in milk, leave them be for about a day, and that town gets to work. What they're doing, in plain terms, is eating the milk sugar, lactose, and turning it into lactic acid. That's the tang you taste. It's the same basic chemistry your own muscles use when they burn without enough oxygen. Different setting, same trick. Here's the part that made me sit up, though. A clinical study tracking adults who drank fermented milk daily found measurable shifts in their gut bacteria within about a week, and the early movement started showing up in the first few days. We're not talking theory, we're talking stool samples and lab work. I can't recall if it was my grandmother or her sister who first kept a jar of this going on the windowsill back home. Doesn't matter, really. What matters is that it never stopped working, generation after generation, with nothing but milk and patience. Simple, that's the word for it. No equipment, no heat source, just grains, milk, and 24 hours of trust. Start with a clean glass jar. Drop in 2 tablespoons of active kefir grains, then pour in 2 cups of whole milk, and skip the ultra-pasteurized stuff. It's been heated so hard the grains struggle with it. Cover the jar loosely. A coffee filter and a rubber band does the job. Because this little culture needs to breathe. Set it on the counter, out of direct sun, and leave it for 24 hours. After a day, give it a look. It should be thicker, maybe a touch separated, smelling pleasantly sour, like yogurt's Tangier cousin. Strain it through a plastic or stainless mesh strainer, never aluminum, into a clean bowl. The grains stay in the strainer. Here's a little garden aside for you. I keep my backup jar of grains tucked behind the basil on the windowsill. And don't you know, the cat's knocked it over twice this year alone. Stubborn animal. Pop that strained kefir in the fridge, and it's ready to drink, pour over oats, or blend into a smoothie. Feed the leftover grains fresh milk again, and the whole cycle starts over. Potent, renewable, about as close to a gift from the Creator as a kitchen counter gets. If you can't do dairy, this is the cousin you want. Water kefir grains are a different little community entirely, mostly bacteria and yeast that feed on plain sugar water instead of milk. What they're doing underneath all that fizz is converting simple sugar into carbon dioxide and a small amount of alcohol, typically well under 1%, not enough to register as anything close to an alcoholic beverage. That bubbling you see and hear, that's the gas finding its way out. A laboratory comparison of fermented sugar water drinks found measurable live bacterial counts after just 24 hours at room temperature, enough that researchers classified it as an active ferment rather than just flavored sugar water. Rare. This one is, in terms of how often I see folks even know it exists. Most people have heard of kombucha. Water kefir's quieter cousin doesn't get nearly the credit. And it doesn't need tea, doesn't need a giant mushroom-looking thing floating in your cupboard. Just sugar, water, and grains smaller than a lentil. Dissolve a 1/4 cup of cane sugar into 4 cups of room temperature filtered water. Chlorinated tap water can slow the grains down, so filtered is worth the extra step. Add a quarter cup of active water kefir grains, drop in a slice of dried fig or a wedge of lemon for minerals, and cover loosely with a cloth. Leave it 24 hours on the counter. You're watching for tiny bubbles climbing the sides and the fig rising and falling like a little buoy. That's the gas doing its work, dearie. Strain out the grains and the fruit, and your water kefir's ready. Pour it over ice, or do a second ferment with a splash of fruit juice for a day for a natural fizz. Feed the strained grains more sugar water, and they just keep going. Far as I'm concerned, that's about the most patient house guest you could ask for. This is the one I mentioned at the start. No starter culture required. None. You're capturing wild yeast straight off the ginger skin and out of your own kitchen air. Here's the simple version of what's happening. Ginger skin carries naturally occurring yeast and bacteria. Feed them sugar and water, and within a day they start multiplying, like opening the door to guests who are already standing right outside. Food microbiologists who've cultured wild ginger bugs in lab conditions consistently identify a mix of lactic acid bacteria and wild yeast strains within the first 24 to 48 hours, confirming it's a genuine spontaneous fermentation, not just sugar going stale. First time I tried this, I was certain I'd done something wrong because nothing seemed to happen for the first 12 hours. Then I went out to check on the tomatoes, came back in, and there it was, fizzing away like it had somewhere to be. Free. That's the honest word for it. A piece of ginger, some sugar, water from your own tap. Grate 2 tablespoons of unpeeled fresh ginger. The skin's where most of the wild yeast lives, so don't you dare peel it. Into a clean pint jar. Add 2 tablespoons of cane sugar and 1 cup of filtered water. Stir well and cover loosely with a cloth secured by a rubber band. Leave it on the counter 24 hours. Tomorrow, you'll feed it another tablespoon each of grated ginger and sugar. Same routine, same time of day if you can manage it. After about 5 days of that daily feeding, you'll have a properly active bug. But even at the 24-hour mark, you'll see the first proof it's alive. A steady little ring of bubbles right at the surface. Once it's active, strain off a few tablespoons of that bubbly liquid and use it to start a batch of homemade ginger soda or fermented lemonade. The plant world giving you fizz for free. Now that's a blessing from the soil if I ever saw one. Fair warning, this one has a texture that takes some folks by surprise. Stringy, sticky. The first time, I about set my spoon down and walked away. I didn't. Glad for it now. A specific bacteria, Bacillus subtilis, is what turns plain steamed soybeans into natto in roughly 24 hours at a warm, steady temperature. Think of it like a tiny construction crew breaking the soybean proteins down into smaller, easier-to-use building blocks while spinning off that signature sticky web as a side effect. Nutrition researchers have measured natto's vitamin K2 content as among the highest of any commonly eaten food, and several observational studies out of Japan have linked regular natto consumption with markers of bone and cardiovascular health. Evidence indicates a connection. It's not framed as a guarantee, mind you, just a pattern researchers keep finding. Was it my mother or my aunt who first told me about this dish from her own travels? Goodness, my memory's gone soft on that one. Either way, it stuck with me long after the conversation did. Patience. That's all this one really asks of you. The heat and the time do the rest. Soak 1 cup of small soybeans overnight, then steam or pressure cook them until they're soft enough to mash between your fingers. That softness matters. The bacteria can't work through a hard bean. While the beans are still warm, mix in a small spoonful of natto starter culture. Just a 1/4 teaspoon, that's all it takes, and spread the beans in a thin layer across a shallow dish. Cover loosely with a clean cloth and tuck the dish somewhere warm, near a sunny window, or inside a turned-off oven with the light left on. Or use a yogurt maker if you've got one. Either way, it needs about 24 hours at roughly body temperature. When you uncover it, you're looking for that white, slightly translucent film and the sticky strands when you stir. That's your proof the bacteria did its job. Refrigerate it for a day before eating to let the flavor settle. Then serve it over warm rice with a touch of soy sauce and chopped green onion. Strong stuff. Worth it. Full tempeh usually takes a day and a half to 2 days, start to finish. But the magic, the part that actually surprises folks, happens almost entirely in that first 24 hours. So I'm putting it on the list. A mold called Rhizopus oligosporus is doing the work here. Think of it as a network of tiny white threads stitching the soybeans together, sort of how a spider web holds dew, except this web is edible and it's binding your beans into a solid block. Food scientists studying the fermentation timeline of Tempeh have documented visible mycelium growth and a measurable rise in surface temperature within the first 18 to 24 hours of incubation, which is the mold actively respiring and multiplying, not spoilage. Truth be told, the first time I checked mine at the 24-hour mark, I half expected to find a ruined mess. Instead, there it was, white as fresh snow, holding together like it had been planned that way all along. Rare, that feeling when something works exactly as the books say it should. Simple ingredients, soybeans, vinegar, a touch of mold culture. The patience is the only complicated part. Soak and cook 1 cup of dried soybeans until just tender, then split and dehulled if you can manage it. Split beans give the mold more surface to grip. Pat them completely dry. Any extra moisture invites the wrong kind of mold. Add a tablespoon of vinegar per cup of beans. That acidity discourages bacteria while the mold gets established. Then mix in your Tempeh starter culture according to the packet's ratio. Pack the inoculated beans into a perforated bag or a shallow dish. They need airflow, so don't seal them tight, and set them somewhere warm, around 88 degrees Fahrenheit, for 24 hours. Check it at the 24-hour mark. You're looking for fine white threads just starting to knit the beans together and a faint mushroomy smell. Not a sour or ammonia smell. That would mean something's gone wrong. Leave it another 12 to 24 hours for a fully bound block you can slice and pan fry. Even at the 1-day mark, though, you'll already see why this humble bean dish has fed whole regions for generations. This is a South Indian staple, a batter made from rice and split lentils. And what it does overnight still strikes me as remarkable. It roughly doubles in volume without a single spoonful of baking powder or yeast added on purpose. Wild yeast and lactic acid bacteria, already living quietly on the rice and lentils, wake up once you soak and grind them. They start producing carbon dioxide, same gas that makes bread rise, and that's what puffs the batter up into all those little air pockets. Researchers studying this traditional batter have measured a meaningful rise in B vitamin content after fermentation compared to the unfermented mix. The microbes essentially manufacture extra nutrients as a byproduct of their own growth. I started making this years back after a neighbor, bless her, brought a tiffin of it over one rainy Tuesday, and I about wore out the recipe trying to get the texture right. Still tinker with the ratio now and then. Cheap. About as cheap a ferment as you'll find. Rice, lentils, water, salt. Soak 4 cups of rice and 1 cup of split urid lentils separately in water for about 6 hours. That 4-to-1 ratio is the classic Idli proportion, so drop to 3-to-1 for a thinner dosa batter instead. Drain and grind each one into a smooth, thick paste. The lentils will get noticeably fluffy and pale as you blend them. Combine both pastes in a large bowl. Stir in a teaspoon of salt and mix thoroughly by hand for a few minutes. That hand mixing actually helps trap air into the batter. Cover the bowl loosely and set it in a warm spot for 12 to 24 hours. A turned-off oven with the light on works well if your kitchen runs cool. When it's ready, the batter will have risen visibly and developed a faintly sour, pleasant smell with bubbles breaking the surface when you stir it. Steam spoonfuls in an Idli mold for soft little cakes, or thin the batter with water and spread it on a hot griddle for crisp dosas. 1 bowl of batter, 2 completely different breakfasts. This one's a bit of a hidden gem. Most folks who ferment regularly haven't even heard of it. Rejuvelac is simply the liquid left behind after sprouted wheat grains sit in water for about a day. The sprouting wakes the grain's own enzymes, and wild lactic acid bacteria riding along on the grain start fermenting the released starches and sugars, like a sourdough starter, except the grain stays whole and the liquid is what you keep. Food researchers analyzing rejuvelac have documented active lactic acid bacteria populations and a measurable pH drop within 24 to 48 hours of fermentation at room temperature. Solid evidence that something real is happening in that jar, not just grain water going cloudy on its own. I'll second-guess myself on this one. I genuinely don't remember which raw foods book first put rejuvelac in front of me. Must have been 30 years back now, but I kept making it long after I forgot the book's name. Quiet. That's the best word for this ferment. No bubbling drama, no strong smell, just a slow, steady tang building in the jar. Soak a half cup of whole wheat berries in water for 8 to 12 hours. Then drain and let them sit, covered loosely, for about 2 days until tiny white sprout tails appear. Once sprouted, rinse the grains well and cover them with 3 cups of fresh filtered water in a clean jar. Cover loosely with a cloth and leave it at room temperature for 24 to 48 hours. The liquid will turn cloudy and develop a light lemony tang as the bacteria work. Strain out the liquid into a clean jar. That's your rejuvelac, and keep it refrigerated. The leftover sprouted grains can be rinsed and used for a second, lighter batch. Use it as a starter culture for homemade nut cheeses, or simply drink a small glass on its own. A humble jar of grain water, doing more work than its plain looks would ever suggest. The buttermilk on most store shelves today isn't the old farmhouse kind. The traditional version, what my own grandmother churned, is simply milk that's been deliberately soured by friendly bacteria, and it's one of the fastest ferments on this whole list. A specific strain of lactic acid bacteria gets added to fresh milk, and within roughly 24 hours at a cool room temperature, it's thickened the milk and dropped its pH. Same basic acid-producing trick as kefir and yogurt, just a gentler, milder version. Dairy science research has shown that this kind of lactic fermentation can lower lactose content in milk by a meaningful margin, which is one reason some people who react poorly to plain milk tolerate cultured buttermilk just fine. My grandmother kept a little crock of this going on her counter year-round, and I swear that woman never once measured anything, just a splash from the old batch into the new milk. Every single time. I've never managed to be quite that casual about it myself. Mild, gentle on the stomach, gentle on the tongue. The easiest one on this list is simply drink straight, no fuss. Warm 2 cups of whole milk gently to about room temperature if it's been refrigerated, then stir in 2 tablespoons of an existing cultured buttermilk or a packet of buttermilk starter culture. Cover the jar loosely and leave it on the counter, away from direct sun, for 24 hours. You'll know it's ready when it's thickened to a pourable yogurt-like consistency and smells pleasantly tangy rather than sharp or off. Give it a good stir to smooth out the texture, then refrigerate. It'll keep developing a touch more tang over the next several days in the fridge. Save back 2 tablespoons before you use the rest, and that's your starter for the next batch. Drink it plain, pour it over berries, or use it in any baking recipe calling for buttermilk. It'll never let you down there. Your standard yogurt usually sets up in 6 to 12 hours. We're going the long way on purpose here, a slow 24-hour ferment, because it changes something important about the final jar. The longer those friendly bacteria sit and feed, the more thoroughly they consume the milk sugar. By the 24-hour mark, research on extended fermentation yogurt has measured lactose levels dropping substantially, not necessarily to zero, but low enough that many lactose-sensitive people tolerate it noticeably better than fresh milk. A comparative lactose testing study on home-fermented yogurt found that batches cultured for 24 hours had measurably lower residual lactose than batches stopped at the standard 8-hour mark. Useful information if lactose is something your stomach takes issue with. Stubborn, this batch was. The first time I tried stretching it that long, I kept checking it every hour like a worried hen. certain I'd ruin the milk. I hadn't. It just needed me to leave it be. Thick, tangier than the quick stuff, and considerably easier on a sensitive stomach. Heat 4 cups of whole milk to about 180 degrees Fahrenheit for a thicker set, then cool it back down to around 110 degrees. Whisk in 2 tablespoons of plain live culture yogurt as your starter, making sure it's fully blended with no lumps. Pour into a clean jar, wrap it in a towel to hold the warmth, and tuck it into a turned-off oven with the light on, or a dehydrator set low for the full 24 hours. Resist the urge to jostle it. After a full day, you'll have a thick, set yogurt with a gentle wobble when you tilt the jar. Refrigerate before eating to let it firm up further. Top it with whatever the garden's offering that week. For me, that's usually a spoon of stewed plums from the tree out back. Last one on the list, and it's the loudest in flavor for the least amount of fuss. This is the deli-style half-sour pickle, not the vinegar kind from the supermarket shelf, the real, salt brine, bacteria-driven kind. A simple salt brine creates an environment where the lactic acid bacteria already living on the cucumber skin can thrive, while less helpful bacteria struggle, like setting up a room where only the guests you invited actually feel comfortable staying. Within 24 hours, those bacteria have already started souring the brine. Food safety researchers studying short brine cucumber fermentation have measured a meaningful pH drop within the first 24 hours at room temperature, which is exactly the acidic environment that keeps unwanted bacteria from getting comfortable in that jar. Plainly put, the first batch I ever made sat a touch too long on a warm August day and went soft on me. Lesson learned the hard way: 24 hours, in a cool spot, is exactly long enough for a crisp half-sour and not a minute more. Crisp, sharp, done before supper the next day. Pack 4 to 5 small, firm cucumbers into a clean quart jar along with 2 cloves of smashed garlic, a few dill fronds, and a half teaspoon of mustard seed. Dissolve 2 tablespoons of sea salt into 2 cups of filtered water and pour the brine over the cucumbers until they're fully submerged. Weigh the cucumbers down with a small fermentation weight or a clean stone and cover the jar loosely. Set it in a cool spot. 65 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit is ideal. Check at the 24-hour mark for cloudy brine and the faintest sour smell. That's your sign the fermentation's underway. The cucumbers will still be quite crisp at this point, not fully soured yet. Refrigerate at that point to slow things down and keep that crisp half-sour bite, or leave it another day or 2 on the counter if you prefer a fuller sour. Either way, slice one open and you'll taste exactly what those bacteria have been up to. 10 ferments, every one of them ready inside a single turn of the clock. Dairy, soy, grain, vegetable, and one that needed nothing but ginger and tap water to get going. None of this replaces a conversation with your own doctor, especially if you're managing a health condition. I'm a retired nurse, not your nurse, not anymore. But the chemistry here is sound, and the patience required is shorter than most folks assume. If you tried even one of these this week, I'd love to hear which one in the comments below. And if this kind of practical, slow living content is useful to you, subscribe. I've got a whole homestead's worth more coming. Here's my garden fence question for you. Of these 10, which ferment do you think would hold up best in a kitchen with no temperature control at all? Say, an unheated cabin in February? Tell me your reasoning, not just your guess. I read every one of these. I'll leave you the way I always do. Whatever you're fermenting, whatever you're growing, may the Lord keep you healthy, and I'll see you in the next one.